Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal. We are continuing our journey through Line 5. And as I explained yesterday, I skipped past Chapter 2, which is about sexual misconduct by abortion practitioners, and particularly in abortion clinics or toward abortion patients, because there's just so much research that I need to do to try to find the original source documents. And then I have to figure out how I want to arrange it. So we put that aside. Yesterday we talked about how untrustworthy the National Abortion Federation is. And most people who aren't activists in abortion or media people who have the little Planned Parenthood, National Abortion Federation thing in whatever the modern equivalent is of your Rolodex, to call them and get some excuses anytime some bad abortion thing happens. But pretty much everybody's heard of Planned Parenthood. And unfortunately, a lot of people trust them because they are so good at public relations. And you have to understand there's a huge gap between your public relations picture and what really goes on. Now, Crutcher opens this section by noting that Planned Parenthood are the snobs of the abortion lobby, and they are looked on with quite a bit of disdain by other practitioners for this snooty attitude. And again, a lot of that is because, first of all, they have tapped into so much tax money, and then they spend that tax money making themselves look good so that they can get more tax money. So it's this cycle where they're using our money to convince us that they are just absolutely wonderful. And, people are out supporting them thinking that they're supporting all the things that the public relations arm tells you is true. But, if you think Planned Parenthood is wonderful, I want you to really approach this with an open mind and think of them as you would any other large corporation. Now, technically, they're supposed to be a nonprofit, but they're broken up into so many little arms so that they can lobby. They're not supposed to be doing political stuff because of their tax exempt status, but they do. But think of them as any other large corporation, okay? Now, Crutcher says that the stuff we found about Planned Parenthood was as bad as the stuff we found about National Abortion Federation or independent providers. And the most egregious stuff I've seen going on, Planned Parenthood has never, that I have seen, risen to the level of most egregious. Certainly so bad that you wouldn't trust them, but they're not Lawson Akpolonu or Kermit Gosnell level horrendous. Even the dirtiest Planned Parenthood is cleaner than Kermit Gosnell's clinic, cleaner than Lawson Akpolonu's clinic. Now, that's not saying a lot, the cleaner than Kermit Gosnell is a pretty low bar. But, Mark isn't being accurate when he says that things are just as bad at Planned Parenthood. Now, I'm going to jump ahead to Kermit Gosnell. Planned Parenthood admitted that women had reported the goings-on at Gosnell's clinic to them, and they said that they encouraged women to report Gosnell to the medical board. But just as there's no evidence that Planned Parenthood was actively referring women to Gosnell, there's no evidence that they took any steps to warn women about Gosnell. They're like the bystanders who listened while Kitty Genovese was murdered. It's just not our problem. Let somebody else deal with it. And that's pretty much how I characterize the entire pro-choice movement. They're like the people who listened to Kitty Genovese scream while she was being murdered and didn't do anything because it was somebody else's problem, not theirs. Nevertheless, we have found some very disturbing things. And I'm going to tell you, the stuff that we found when I was at Life Dynamics, when we were writing Line 5, everything I've seen indicates that Planned Parenthood has gotten worse since then. Not in terms of filth, but in terms of deceitfulness We'll get to that as we go on. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about things that happened at Planned Parenthood. And you can follow the link to the companion post and find some source material. So, Line 5 recounts a Tennessee case. In October of 1990, a 14-year-old girl named Charity just went through an absolutely horrendous situation. Her older sister came forward and reported that their stepfather had been sexually abusing her. The stepfather responded by killing their mother, then killing himself. So this poor, traumatized 14-year-old girl was sent to live with her grandmother. 6 months later, her biological father called her and said he would kill himself if she didn't move in with him. Charity didn't want to move in with him. She wanted to stay with her grandmother. Her father killed himself. So that put poor Charity in a psychiatric hospital for about a month and a half, which is totally understandable what this poor kid's been through. Then in mid-January of 1993, Charity told her 17-year-old boyfriend, Jason Milliken, that she thought she was pregnant. 2 days later, he took her to Planned Parenthood of Middle Tennessee, where his mother, Sandy Milliken, worked as a counselor. And Jason's mother told Charity that she was 11 or 12 weeks pregnant, and both Jason and his mother pushed for an abortion, but Charity said she wanted to have her baby. I imagine this poor girl had had enough death for a lifetime. Jason started calling Charity every night, threatening to kill himself if she didn't go through with an abortion. And his mother told Charity that she needed to think about Jason and what was right for him and undergo the abortion. Now, next, Jason took Charity to Planned Parenthood's main Nashville facility rather than to talk to his mother. It could be, Charity said she'd had enough of his mom. Hold on a second. The dog's barking her head off. Okay. At any rate, Jason took Charity to the Nashville facility where she spoke to a different counselor, not his mother. And again, Charity stressed that she did not want an abortion. Again, Jason threatened to commit suicide. And according to the lawsuit, the counselor pushed a paper in front of Charity and told her to sign it without reading it, which she did. It was a consent form for an abortion. And the medical director, Dr. Peter Cartwright, promptly performed the abortion in defiance of a law requiring that a minor's parents or guardian be notified at least 2 days prior to an abortion. 2 weeks later, Charity had to have an emergency psychiatric admission to the hospital. She was discharged to her grandmother's care, but she developed such severe mental health issues and troubles with drug and alcohol abuse that her grandmother was unable to continue to care for her, and Charity ended up placed in a home for troubled adolescents. And Planned Parenthood totally denied any wrongdoing. Then we can go, that was the young woman who did not want an abortion. Here is a girl who did want an abortion against her mother's wishes because of health risks. Kathy was 16 when she learned that she was pregnant, and her mother took her to a doctor for prenatal care. And the doctor said that Kathy had abnormalities of the cervix and uterus that would make an abortion risky for her. It could endanger her fertility and even her life. Undeterred, she's 16 years old. 16-year-olds don't think 10, 15 years ahead. Kathy made secret plans for an abortion. Her mother learned of the plans and got a court injunction against area abortion facilities to protect her daughter. One of those served with the injunction was Delbert L. Culp, who was the executive director of Planned Parenthood of Central Indiana. He told his staff to notify him if Kathy came to their clinic looking for an abortion. She did. They did. So Delbert and a counselor informed Kathy that they could arrange for her to have an abortion in an out-of-state clinic that wasn't covered by the injunction. So they scheduled an abortion in Louisville, not informing that facility of Kathy's health problems that had caused her obstetrician so much concern. Now, Kathy's mother learned about this and got a restraining order banning Planned Parenthood from providing, quote, any advice or aid in obtaining an abortion and forbidding them to work with others in arranging an abortion. She asked Planned Parenthood for the name of the clinic where the abortion was scheduled because if she couldn't legally protect her child, she at least wanted to provide them with the medical information. Planned Parenthood refused. The next day, Kathy underwent the abortion, and 5 days later, she ended up in the hospital with a life-threatening infection that left her ability to bear children in the future in doubt. Both Kathy and her mother sued Planned Parenthood, but Planned Parenthood venue shopped and got the case transferred before a judge who just dismissed the case. And again, Planned Parenthood insisted that they'd done nothing wrong. Culp said that Kathy's father, though not the custodial parent, had signed a consent form, and that was enough for them to legally go ahead and arrange to endanger this child against her mother's wishes. Now, after those two cases, we decided, just as we called the National Abortion Federation about Steve Lichtenberg and Mayfair Women's Center, we called Planned Parenthood to get their take on questionable doctors and what they tell patients who had any questions about deaths or malpractice. So I called Planned Parenthood to ask why Dr. Robert Christ, who at the time had 2 dead patients to his discredit and numerous other lawsuits, why was he allowed to work at Planned Parenthood? Did he, I wanted to know, meet their internal requirements for a physician to work at one of their clinics? And of course, I was assured that he did. When I asked why somebody with his background would be considered good enough, the employee, Ann Glazier, told me I'd have to talk to Christ. And as was the case with asking NAF about Lichtenberg, I asked what they would tell a patient if she had heard about Christ's background and called to find out if the stories were true. Glazier said that was proprietary information. And I asked how a patient could really know that her doctor was safe and not somebody like Christ. And again, Glazier told me that the patient would have to check the medical board of the American Medical Association. Now, as Crutcher put it, no one can seriously believe that a 15-year-old girl in a crisis pregnancy situation is going to call the American Medical Association in Chicago, the Texas Board of Medical Examiners in Austin, the Missouri Board of Medical Examiners in Jefferson City, and then start sifting through courthouse records in 2 states. Of course, the real reason is why she would have to when the person she's talking to at Planned Parenthood already has that information. When we asked Ms. Glazier whether she thought it was reasonable to expect that kind of effort out of a woman in this situation, her answer was, well, I have to tell you that I have all the confidence in Dr. Christ's skills and judgment. And this exemplary doctor went on to perform the fatal abortion on Nicole Williams at a Planned Parenthood-owned facility in 1997. Now, I will also note that troubled abortionist Bruce Steer, who abandoned his patient Sharon Hamplin to the care of people who shoved her out the door to bleed to death, sometimes worked at a Planned Parenthood. And Andrei Nareov, who performed 2 fatal abortions, did some time as a trainee at Planned Parenthood. So, very questionable standards. Now, Crutcher's closing thoughts. He notes that when we had a woman call the Planned Parenthood hotline asking for an abortion referral, they referred her to Family Planning Associates Medical Group. As of the publication of Line 5, we already had identified 8 women who died as a result of abortions performed by them, plus over 70 other documented allegations relating to botched abortions. Among other things, patients and health department officials have alleged that this organization performed abortions on women who weren't actually pregnant, falsified medical records, paid kickbacks for abortion referrals, maintained unsanitary and unsterile conditions, improperly maintained their medical equipment, allowed non-physicians to practice medicine. The California Department of Health Services once wrote a letter saying that this chain lacks the ability to conform to licensing requirements and is not of reputable and responsible character. And I will also note that this place, good enough for the National Abortion Federation, good enough for Planned Parenthood to refer to, they've racked up another 8 deaths since the publication of Line 5. So we had already known about Patricia Chacon, Mary Pena, Josefina Garcia, Lenise Dorsey, Joyce Ortenzio, Tammy Sumatsu, Susan Levy, and Deanna Bell. I've subsequently learned about Christina Mora, Tatanisha Wesson, Nakia Jordan, Maria Lejo, Kimberly Neal, Maria Rodriguez, Chanel Bryant, and Kyla Ellis. And this isn't even counting Natalie Myers and Denise Holmes, who died at facilities owned by FPA founder Fast Eddie Allred before he christened his abortion empire Family Planning Associates Medical Group. And some Planned Parenthood referrals we have verified did turn deadly. And These are cases where it was mentioned at some point that Planned Parenthood referred them. We're not always going to get a mention in a wrongful death lawsuit who made the referral. But Planned Parenthood referred Christy Style to Mayfair, where she was severely brain dead and languished in a near comatose state for over 22 years before she finally died. After performing a failed abortion, Planned Parenthood referred Elizabeth Stugy to the notorious Inglewood General Hospital for an abortion that ended her life in 1978. Kathy Murphy and Lynette Wallace had already died from abortions at that facility. And in 2007, Planned Parenthood referred Kawaida Espinosa to A to Z Women's Center for the abortion that killed her. And Planned Parenthood, it's a huge abortion conglomerate, but it does seem to have a better track record than the smaller conglomerate of Family Planning Associates Medical Group. You know, FPA is huge. Planned Parenthood does a third of all abortions in the United States. So they're either providing better care or they're better at covering up their deaths. So the deaths I know about, 14-year-old Sandra Kaiser leapt to her death from a highway overpass in 1984 after a secret abortion at Planned Parenthood. In 1987, Elise Kalat suffered an asthma attack after an abortion and ended up dead because Planned Parenthood's uncertified staff were absolutely clueless about how to perform CPR. Diana Lopez bled to death after a Planned Parenthood doctor rushed through a 19-week abortion in only 6 minutes in 2002. Vivian Tran died of sepsis after getting her abortion medications at a Planned Parenthood in 2003, and that same year, the same thing happened to Holly Patterson. A nurse at a Planned Parenthood caused Edrika Goods fatal infection in 2007 by using laminaria in a way that was contraindicated. Roselle Owens died in 2009. Planned Parenthood there had waited nearly 20 minutes to call an ambulance. Tanya Reeves, transferred to a hospital, was delayed for over 4 hours when she suffered injuries in 2012 and she bled to death. And Cree Irwin Shepherd died after being sent home from Planned Parenthood with injuries they hadn't noticed during her 2016 abortion. And if you follow the link below, the cases where I do have photos of the young women, Diana was Hispanic, Roselle was black, Holly was white, Edrika was black, Tanya was black, and Cree was black. Planned Parenthood doesn't seem to be any friend to young black women. Now, I had thought about providing links to a lot of other bad stuff about Planned Parenthood, the lying to patients, facilitating child sexual abuse, setting abortion quotas, pushing hard for abortions even if the woman is hesitant. But the better approach, I think, is I provide a link to Live Action's playlist, Planned Parenthood Workers Speak Out. This allows people who quit working at Planned Parenthood because they were so disgusted, this lets them speak about what they saw when they were actually working there.